At my late husband's funeral, my in-laws returned after 8 years, demanding control of our company and house as his biological parents. Recently, I, a 34-year-old woman, lost my 38-year-old spouse to leukemia. After 10 years of dating and 8 years of marriage, we were business and life partners. As I deal with an unforeseen circumstance that arose at his funeral, I am still trying to digest everything. 5 years ago, my husband received a leukemia diagnosis. In recent months, his condition dramatically worsened despite intensive treatment. He stayed committed to our plastic recycling company, which we started from the beginning, despite his illness. He would video call me to talk about operations and future plans, even from his hospital bed. He was committed and progressive all the way to the end, and that was simply who he was. His funeral last week was where the real trouble started. I was surprised to see my brother-in-law, 40, and my in-laws, both 65 there. After a major falling out over our business endeavor, they had not spoken to us for 8 years. They had consistently given preference to my brother-in-law, treating my husband as though he were somehow less deserving of their care and assistance. They made a concerted effort to dissuade my husband when we first started our firm, saying he was simply mimicking his brother, who had announced a similar initiative. However, this was after we had already completed our market research and started establishing our business. I remained calm and kept my distance from them during the funeral service. But when the majority of people had left, my in-laws came up to me and said they had important things to talk about. At first, people tried to seem understanding by offering their sympathies and inquiring about my husband's last days. I responded succinctly, recalling that they were aware of his health but never paid him a visit during his illness. Then their real motivations became apparent. They began discussing proper inheritance and family responsibilities. To my surprise, they insisted that I give them full control of our company, saying that my brother-in-law could help them run it more effectively. They changed their strategy and demanded our house after I adamantly refused. Their justification was especially offensive. They said that a widow without children didn't require such a large house and that they could make more money by renting out their current residence. Their boldness left me speechless. My husband and I had planned our future together, and this was the house we had created. We have recollections of our lives together in every nook and cranny. It seemed as though they were attempting to obliterate our entire history with their demand. They got combative, threatening legal action and asserting their rights as his parents when I told them that this was not happening at all. They are unaware that my spouse had prepared for this possibility because he thought it might occur. He made a video addressing his parents in particular a month prior to his death. If they ever attempted to seize his assets after his passing, he wanted me to play it for them. I now see why he believed it was important, even if at the time I thought he was being too careful. I have yet to play the video for them. I drove home crying after they threatened me at the funeral, and I didn't think about it until I was by myself in our house. I need to gather my strength before I confront them with the contents of the tape, even though I know it will change everything. I'm concentrating on managing our company for the time being, as my husband and I had intended. He ensured that all the legal documentation was in order at the time of his initial diagnosis. Even though I know I'm right, their demands and threats are making an already unbearably difficult period emotionally taxing for me. I'm having a lot of trouble deciding when to show them the video. A part of me is eager to get it over with, and another part of me wants to wait until they really attempt to file a lawsuit. In any case, I am aware that this is not yet finished. My in-laws' treatment of my spouse throughout his life is painfully recalled by the current circumstance. I observed the glaring disparity in their treatment of their boys when we initially began dating in our mid-20s. Despite his troubles with alcohol and his incapacity to maintain a job, they believed that my brother-in-law could do no wrong. My husband, on the other hand, who put in a great deal of effort at work and always attempted to support his family, was only criticized and dismissed. The last straw for me was a specific Christmas dinner almost 8 years ago. Instead of celebrating the fact that we had just landed our first significant contract for our recycling firm, my in-laws spent the entire evening disparaging our endeavor in comparison to my brother-in-law's comparable business concept. It's important to note that after learning of our achievement, he quickly came up with his strategy. A furious dispute broke out during the dinner when my father-in-law said my husband was overly ambitious and needed to know his place. We didn't really communicate with them again after that. My husband finally understood that their toxic behavior would never change, even though he had always sought their praise despite my advice to advocate for himself. Their total absence during my husband's illness is what makes their current actions even more egregious. We didn't deliberately conceal his leukemia diagnosis from them. Even though they must have been aware of how bad his situation was, they never once inquired about it, sought out, or expressed any desire in getting back together, even though the news had traveled through family connections and they lived in the same city. Over the past 5 years, we have solely concentrated on expanding our company and helping one another during his medical treatment. 3 states had taken notice of our plastic recycling firm, and we were even highlighted in a number of environmental business periodicals. Even on his hardest days in the hospital, my husband would light up when we discussed our most recent projects or our goals for future growth because he was so pleased with what we had created together. His final month of life was especially challenging. When he realized he was running out of time, he started organizing things very methodically. He recorded that video message for his parents, reorganized all of our business records, and revised his will. I recall the day he took the recording. Despite being in his hospital room, he insisted on wearing his favorite business outfit because he was having one of his best days. He handled things with remarkable composure, far more so than I did. He warned me that day, "They'll try to take everything we built, not because they need it, but because they never believed in me. Within ourselves. They will want to demonstrate that they were correct all along." He forced me to make a commitment to maintain my ground and defend the things we had created together, including our shared dream as well as our worldly possessions. I've only seen the video message he taped that day once, but it's really impactful. He talks about all the years of partiality, the contemptuous remarks, and the occasions when they choose to believe in his brother rather than him. But in its clarity, it is painful, honest, and unvarnished. It is neither furious nor bitter. He also talks about me, how everything we created together was intended to remain just that, ours, and how I was ultimately the only family he truly had. I received a string of progressively hostile texts from my in-laws the day following the altercation at the burial. They asserted that they were morally entitled to his legacy since they were his parents. Totally ignoring their own part in the alienation, they even implied that I had somehow coerced their son into removing them from his life. I had stolen their son and was now stealing his legacy, and their most recent mail threatened to expose this. My spouse had painstakingly documented everything, which made their threats all the more ridiculous. Every significant choice pertaining to our company was decided upon collaboratively and documented appropriately. All of our accomplishments were the result of years of diligence, forethought, and commitment, exactly the traits his parents had disregarded in him all of his childhood. I came upon a picture from our first business meeting last night while perusing some old pictures at his home office. Sitting at our small leased office space with our first recycling machine, we were so youthful and full of hope. My husband's parents had refused to assist, claiming it was a silly dream, so he had taken out a personal loan to purchase that equipment. By transforming that one machine into a cutting-edge operation with more than 50 employees, we disproved their claims. He had preserved some old emails, including ones from his parents, which I also found. It was like witnessing their relationship fall apart in slow motion as you read through them. Their criticism made every accomplishment seem less significant, and every accomplishment was compared to his brother. In fact, they accused him of wanting to eclipse his brother by launching our company in their most recent email, which was sent 8 years ago. Ironically, they never believed in his legacy when he was alive, but now they say they deserve it. They never paid us a visit, never acknowledged our accomplishments, and never showed any curiosity about what we had constructed. They didn't get in touch, even after our creative recycling technique was highlighted in the local media. However, now that he's gone, they feel the need to take possession of all he put so much effort into creating. They want to challenge the will, according to their most recent threat, which they got this morning. They say they have proof that I had an undue effect on my husband in his last days. It's nearly absurd. He was more focused and resolute than ever in those last days. He made sure that everything was legally guaranteed because he knew exactly what he wanted. My in-laws have no case, according to the legal team at our company, with whom I have been talking. My husband's will is unambiguous and compliant with the law, and everything is appropriately recorded. Additionally, they have encouraged me to preserve all correspondence from my in-laws because their threatening comments can prove helpful in the event that this goes to court. When they unexpectedly arrived at our corporate headquarters yesterday, it was their most recent attempt at intimidation. Demanding to address the board of directors, they created quite a stir in the lobby. It's still the family business we started together, and we don't even have a board. They yelled that they would expose the truth about how their kid was coerced out of his family before our security team had to escort them out. The most agonizing aspect of it all is seeing them destroy their own son's legacy in an effort to seize what he created. My spouse finally realized that nothing he accomplished would ever be good enough after years of attempting to gain their favor. He ultimately found serenity in embracing that and concentrating on our shared life. Everything will be different because of the video he left behind. In addition to addressing their recent attempts to seize his money, he also directly addresses their years of favoritism and emotional manipulation. Speaking with the same quiet strength he often displayed in business meetings, He taped it while sitting in his hospital room in his finest suit on one of his final lucid days. I'm going to their house tomorrow to show them the footage. I've come to the conclusion that waiting any longer is pointless. They must know precisely where they are and why. My husband planned for their behavior since he knew them well enough to anticipate it. It's time for them to hear his parting speech. Just in case things go out of hand, I've already made plans for our lawyer to be available tomorrow. This video's content goes beyond simply criticizing their most recent actions. It provides a thorough description of how they treated him over the course of his life, including particular incidents and dates. Even in this, he was meticulous. The thing that most amazes me about this whole situation is exactly what my spouse predicted it would be. He was aware that they would want to take credit for the things we created together, not because they were proud of them but more because they would never be able to believe that he was successful without their help. He knew that, like they had done during his life, they would attempt to discredit his decisions even after he passed away. The irony is that things may have turned out differently if they had even a small amount of interest in his life during his leukemia battle. However, they made the decision to remain silent throughout his entire sickness, never contacting him or inquiring about his health. They now have the audacity to assert ownership of what he and I jointly constructed. I'm not only defending our company and our house, I'm defending his legacy, our common goal, and the real him, not the son they rejected, but the intelligent, compassionate, and driven man who created something significant in spite of their lack of belief in him. They will finally hear his final words to them tomorrow, and they will see why their allegations are unfounded. I'm currently fortifying myself and getting ready for the future. As he would have desired, the business is still thriving, and his parents will soon, very soon, find out precisely how their son felt about their unexpected interest in his legacy. Update 1. I wanted to share some updates from my last post, which was a week ago. Despite the huge emotional toll of losing my husband and coping with his parents' threats, I'm lucky to have an amazing support network. To assist me cope with this new reality, my parents have temporarily moved in with me. Although he still works, my father has taken up all of my husband's practical responsibilities, including food shopping, housework, and bill payment. I've never been good at remembering to buy necessities. Since our housekeeper just resigned for personal reasons, my mother has been handling the cooking and cleaning. Unbeknownst to me, their presence has been a blessing. Concentrating on my profession has become essential to me. The fantastic team my husband and I created together is primarily responsible for the efficient operation of our company today. Throughout this trying time, they have demonstrated amazing loyalty and support. During our management meeting last week, a number of longtime staff members related how my husband had aided their professional development. Hearing these recollections was both touching and devastating. But sometimes I'm hit hard by the fact that he's not here. His coffee mug was still on the desk, just where he left it on his last day of work, and I almost lost it when I was in his office yesterday trying to find some paperwork. I miss the little things we used to do together, like having coffee in the morning, talking about company plans, taking lunch together, and even jokingly arguing about how to organize files. The ongoing fear of legal action from my in-laws is what makes things more difficult. Yesterday, their attorney got in touch with our legal team and made nebulous claims regarding familial rights and undue influence. Even though our attorneys told me that these accusations are unfounded, dealing with these attacks during a time of grief is nonetheless extremely taxing. Our clients' and business partners' support has been tremendous. Several people have expressed their confidence in my abilities to continue running the company, and many have written poignant letters about their experiences working with my spouse. It means a lot, especially in light of my in-laws' attempts to cast doubt on my competence to manage the company. In part to keep myself occupied and in part to make sure everything keeps going well, I've been putting in more hours at the office. Our environmental impact objectives have always been very important to my spouse, and I'm committed to upholding and advancing his vision. He was very enthusiastic about a project we are now discussing: the opening of a new recycling center in a neighboring state. Through it all, my parents have been incredible. One of them is always available if I need assistance thanks to the rotation system they have set up. In an attempt to better understand my day-to-day existence, my mother has even begun to study about how our firm is run. In order to filter out any efforts at communication from my in-laws, Dad has been taking care of all the incoming mail and phone calls. Coming home to our residence every evening is the most difficult part. Every room has memories, and without him, it can feel impossible at times. However, I'm making an effort to put more emphasis on my appreciation for the 10 years we had together than on the future we lost. Grief is the cost of love, as my mother always reminds me, and my spouse was worth every cry. Update 2. My in-laws decided to challenge the will 2 weeks ago. Our lawyer told me about the formal proceedings during our recent meeting. Even though we're not overly concerned about the result, dealing with this pointless legal dispute at this already trying time is aggravating. Now my in-laws have changed their strategy. They tried to scare me with their alleged plan in an email they sent me yesterday. They said they were entitled to everything since they were his flesh and blood, and that my attempt to scare them away with the video, which I haven't even shown them yet, wouldn't work. They even went so far as to declare that they no longer only came for the property. They now feel entitled to shares in the company. Fortunately, courts do not function according to what individuals believe they are entitled to. The communication actually thrilled my lawyer, who said it would be helpful proof of their objectives. I sent all of this information to our legal staff, who are constructing a more compelling argument against their assertions. All of this has been made possible by my parents' tremendous support. In the hopes that they could react better to a different set of parents, they even offered to speak with my in-laws, but I turned them down. I want them to proceed with their case at this point because I am certain that it will be a complete waste of their time and money, which is precisely what I desire given their actions. The last several weeks have been hectic, with a steady flow of people coming to see how I'm doing or to express condolences since they were unable to make it to the service. I've hardly had time to think about my own emotions because I've been so busy taking care of business and entertaining myself. However, I nearly lost it the other day while I was in my husband's office trying to find some documents pertaining to my job. I only hoped I could speak to him again, to express my love and miss him, because I could picture him there so vividly. My top priority right now is making sure our company keeps growing. I am aware that he would have preferred that. His drive has inspired me to put in even more effort. Even on the most difficult days, I am motivated to keep going by his vision for the success of our business. With all the paperwork my husband left behind, our legal team is confident in our position. Responses to any possible allegations of undue influence or family rights have already been drafted. Everyone involved in the issue understands the irony of my in-laws attempting to assert any rights after 8 years of total silence. It's touching to see how many lives my husband affected, and my mother has taken to arranging all of the messages and condolence cards we've received. His honesty and inventiveness in the field have been documented by colleagues, business associates, and even rivals. My in-laws' present attempts to portray him as someone who was coerced out of his family are in sharp contrast to these testimonies. The most challenging aspect is keeping my cool during this entire ordeal. Whether it's another threatening email from my in-laws or just the agony of missing him, there are fresh hurdles every day. But I'm committed to preserving everything we created together, not only for me, but also for his legacy. Our senior management team and I will be meeting tomorrow to talk about our expansion plans, which my husband was really looking forward to before he became ill. Even as we navigate these legal obstacles, it feels good to be pursuing his aspirations. I plan to prove him correct when he says that the best form of retaliation is success. Update 3. 2 weeks have passed since my in-laws challenged the will, and yesterday something really intriguing occurred. My brother-in-law, of all people, sent me a note. I was taken aback because we have absolutely nothing to discuss, and it seemed brave of him to get in touch with me considering what his parents are doing. We're absolutely not on terms where we can text each other casually, and we've never been very close. He texted me to ask if he could come over to my house. Something compelled me to give it a shot even though my first reaction was to decline and block his phone. I felt it had something to do with my in-laws, and I had a gut sense this might be significant. I also agreed to meet him because my parents would be home. He brought flowers and offered his condolences when he came, explaining that the circumstances with his parents had prevented him from expressing them appropriately during the burial. This wasn't the kind of behavior I expected, therefore I was surprised by how considerate it was. He had always struck me as being rather noisy and conceited in our past encounters at family get-togethers. Even more unexpectedly, he no longer had the same alcoholic odor as he had years before. His performance appeared to have been thoroughly cleaned up. He rambled on for a while before getting to the subject. He was there to inform me that his parents intended to discredit me and it would not be a pleasant experience. They were making up a story about how I was now rejecting their assertion that my husband had borrowed money from them to launch our company. They intended to spread their lies on social media as they were unable to legally pursue this angle due to the lack of a legally binding contract. I couldn't understand why they believed it would work because it was such a naive plan. But I was glad he came to alert me so I could take preventative action. Then he revealed something more intimate. He had been trying to improve himself over the last few years and had made multiple attempts to get in touch with us. But he lacked the bravery to do so after mistreating his brother for years. He knew it was too late, but now he was here to make amends for everything. I was totally unprepared when he actually began to cry. He was comforted by my father, who was there and prepared him a cup of tea to help him relax. I reassured him that everything would be alright and that I was certain his brother would have valued his gesture when he eventually left. He felt somewhat better as a result of this. In all honesty, I don't believe he was responsible for most of what transpired. Both of his children were let down by their parents. By treating him as the golden child, they believed they were doing him a favor, but in the end, they did neither of their kids any favors and instead spoiled him. I simply feel sorry for them both. They were entitled to better lives and better parents. My viewpoint on this whole situation has changed as a result of my brother-in-law's visit. Both boys were obviously impacted by the poisonous familial dynamics, albeit in different ways. His sibling is just now starting to see the harm their parents inflicted, while my husband found the strength to escape and start a new life. Update 4. After talking to my lawyer, I informed him of what my brother-in-law had told us. In order to use my in-laws' social media posts against them in court, we agreed to wait and see how things would develop. Our legal staff verified that having my brother-in-law testify against his parents would strengthen our case, and he even offered to do so if needed. My in-laws finally posted on social media a few days ago. I emailed them right away to warn them that we would take legal action and file a defamation case if they didn't remove it right away. They probably didn't anticipate such a prompt and stern reaction. When I told them that their own son was now on our side, it probably didn't boost their confidence. Almost instantly, they removed the message, but they insisted in their reply that they would take everything away from me. Their actions have now become nearly monotonous. I blocked their email address and wished them luck with their goals. They can do whatever they want, but now that my brother-in-law, their lone possible ally, is no longer on their side, they will need that luck. I am aware of the irony of the entire situation. They are now frantically striving to leverage family ties they themselves broke years ago in an attempt to obtain a share of the company they once wrote off as a silly dream. All of our legal records, their prior actions, and now the testimony of their own kid all point against them. Our attorneys are optimistic that this will shortly come to an end. They are aware that they are in a precarious position because they promptly took down their defamatory message after being threatened with legal action. Everyone concerned is realizing more and more that they have no case, either morally or legally. Knowing that my spouse was correct all along is what makes me the happiest, not the possibility of winning in court. He diligently prepared for the possibility that they would do something similar. Because of the legal measures he took and the video he left behind, he is still defending what we created together. Our company is still doing very well, and we are proceeding with the plans for growth that my husband was really enthusiastic about. Our clients have been understanding during this entire process, and the team is still very supportive. Honoring his legacy by carrying on with the dream we both shared is ultimately what counts. Now and then, my brother-in-law calls to see how I'm doing. Our family dynamics have changed in a little but significant way. It's never too late for people to own up to their mistakes and make an effort to improve, even though it's too late to save certain relationships. My husband has always had that belief, and I'm beginning to understand why. I am aware that I still have difficult days ahead of me, both personally and professionally, but I am also ready for whatever comes next. That was my husband's responsibility, and I plan to honor him by preserving and expanding everything we created together.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
I discovered my fiancée and my sister in bed together during my engagement party, and my parents asked me to stay silent to protect her reputation. I am a tenured professor at a large northeastern university, 42F. Since I'm still processing what happened at my wedding and, to be honest, I need some perspective, I need to explain what happened. Let me first briefly explain the dynamics of my family. Lisa, 38F, my younger sister, has always been our parents' favorite. Lisa entered the media industry and became a local TV personality, while I spent years conducting research and writing articles for academic purposes. Our parents were always telling me how successful and gregarious Lisa was. The partiality was brutally evident when I was growing up. Our parents paid top bucks for Lisa to enroll in theatrical classes. I was told to use what we had when I required equipment for my science projects. All our lives, this trend persisted. The only person who really encouraged me to pursue my academic goals was my dad's mother, my grandma Martha. "Elena, you have a gift in your mind," she would often tell me. "Don't allow someone to make you less bright." While my parents were occupied watching one of Lisa's TV segments, she joined me in celebrating the publication of my first research paper in a famous magazine. After putting a lot of effort into my job, I became one of the youngest female professors in my field. Even though it wasn't the life my parents had in mind, I created a life of which I was proud. Then, during an academic meeting, I met David, 44M. He was pleasant, intelligent, and seemed to have a unique understanding of me. After 2 years of dating, I was ecstatic when David proposed. How did my folks respond? Well, at least you won't be alone with your books anymore. Even more telling was Lisa's response. With the same patronizing grin she had had since she was a young girl, she exclaimed, "At last. I was concerned that you wouldn't meet someone who could cope with your intensity." The celebration of my engagement took place at my parents' home. Lisa insisted on assisting with the arrangements, but her idea of assistance mainly consisted of offering suggestions that were more in line with her preferences and criticizing my selections. She began to visit our home regularly, particularly during my work hours. I assumed she was simply acting in her typical domineering manner. In retrospect, there were a lot of warning signs that I decided to overlook. The way Lisa would enter a room and David's gaze would follow her. How she would laugh at his jokes and touch his arm. Lisa started coming to our neighborhood at the same time that David was spending more and more late nights at the lab. I recall the final instance of normalcy before things went awry. I was standing in the bedroom from my early years, examining old pictures hanging on the wall. Several glitzy photos of Lisa were hidden below my graduation photo. It seemed appropriate, a fitting illustration of my role inside the family. However, what followed? Things took an unexpected turn at that point. Downstairs, the engagement celebration was in full force, and I became aware that I hadn't seen David in a while. I told myself he was probably just making a work call, so I went upstairs to look for him. I heard noises coming from my former bedroom at that moment. My hand was motionless on the doorknob while I stood there for a while. I opened the door even though I had a sneaking suspicion of what I would discover. David and Lisa were entangled on the bed where I grew up. I had spent many evenings studying for my PhD qualifications in the same bed. Lisa lacked even the grace to display embarrassment. "Oh, Elena, you should have known," she continued with that same condescending grin. "I always manage to achieve what I desire." The worst thing. Richard, 40M, a prosperous real estate developer, was Lisa's husband. While his wife ruined my engagement, he was gone on business, most likely closing another $1 million deal. I can't really recall what transpired next. In some way, my legs carried me down the hallway as I backed out of the room. David's voice carried that false sincerity I now knew all too well as he called after me, "Elena, hold on. It isn't what you believe." However, it was precisely what I had assumed. Before my parents caught me, I had already gone halfway down the steps. My expression must have told them everything. "Elena, sweetie, please don't make a scene," was my mother's initial statement. "Consider your sister's union. The marriage of my sister. Not the broken engagement I had. My heart isn't broken. The marriage of my sister." With a low, anxious voice, Dad joined in. "You are aware of Richard's fidelity issues. A prenuptial agreement exists. She might lose everything. Elena, please consider the impact this would have on the family." The family. The same family that had prioritized Lisa's needs at all times. The same family that had disregarded my accomplishments, disparaged my decisions, and now demanded that I shield their golden kid from the repercussions of her own behavior. I passed them and entered the crowded gathering. When I walked in, the room fell silent. They must have noticed something in my face. David came up the stairs, buttoning his shirt hurriedly. Her flawless makeup was a little smudged a few moments later. My voice was unusually steady as I continued. "I apologize, but the engagement is off. I have to go, but please enjoy the food and beverages." Whispers and gasps began instantly. Behind me, I could hear my mother's shoes clicking quickly on the floor, but I continued. I went outside to my car after grabbing my keys. David was beckoning me, demanding an opportunity to clarify. Mom was crying for commitment to the family. Lisa watched from the doorway with the same angry smile, strangely mute. I packed up everything that belonged to David, including his priceless collection of rare scientific papers, books, and clothes, and drove directly home. Everything was placed in boxes. After renting a storage container and dropping off his items, I sent him the address and code to get entry. I then blocked all of his social media accounts, his email, and his phone number. My relatives began sending me messages right away, including guilt trips about how this would ruin Lisa's marriage, pleas to stay quiet about what had happened, and cautions about family loyalty. I also blocked their numbers. I came to a realization that evening while I was sitting by myself in my partially vacant flat. This was more than merely David's treachery. This was the result of my family always picking Lisa over me. I had finally had enough of them choosing her happiness above mine. I inhaled deeply, made a glass of wine for myself, and started methodically clearing out their contact details from my phone. Every time I deleted something, I felt lighter. I was choosing myself for the first time in my life. I put myself into my work after that night. My haven was the university. I worked in the lab for several hours as my research team worked on a molecular biology breakthrough project. Despite noticing my alteration, my co-workers were gracious enough to keep their distance. Richard, the husband of Lisa, arrived at my workplace 3 weeks following the engagement celebration. His normally spotless suit was a little rumpled, and he appeared exhausted. Simply put, "I need to know everything," he said. I was honest with him. He grabbed the armrest of his chair and listened in quiet, his knuckles white. After I was done, he got up, fixed his tie and remarked, "I appreciate your candor. You have at least one family member who respects the truth." Then he went away. My parents' efforts to get in touch with me grew more urgent. Voicemails about mending the family were left by Mom. Dad emailed about forgiving others and moving on. It was surprised that Lisa remained completely silent on the radio. My grandma later told me that Richard was divorcing them and had left their home. My pillar of support throughout this period was my grandmother Martha. She would sit with me, share stories about her personal challenges, and bring home cooked meals. It was her opinion that the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. I was resolved to turn my suffering into something useful. So I concentrated on drafting my next research article. One of the best journals in my profession approved the work. A professor at another university sent me a congrats email the day it was published. Michael, 45M, was his name, and he was an expert in research facility architecture. Michael's email was kind but professional. He remarked that he had read my earlier work and that our departments might work together. I was drawn to his writing style because it demonstrated more than simply professional etiquette. There was a sincere interest in the science. We started a communication regarding the relationship between research efficiency and laboratory design once I replied. Over time, our emails grew longer and more intimate. He talked about how his own family had helped him pursue his unusual career path of integrating scientific study with building. I really ran into him one day when I was buying coffee at the school cafe. I spilt my coffee all over his white shirt while he was at our university for a conference. As I assisted him in cleaning up, Michael grinned and commented, "Well, this is quite different from our email conversations," rather than being upset. He asked if he could get me a coffee substitute. I paused. I had vowed to never date again after David, especially in academic settings. However, Michael was different in some way. Perhaps it was the way his eyelids wrinkled when he grinned or the fact that he made no effort to impress me with his academic background. Observing my hesitancy, he laughed, "I promise I'm not a serial killer. Just a clumsy architect who'd like to replace your coffee and maybe hear more about your latest research in person." "Just coffee," I firmly stated. For the first time in months, I felt at ease as we sat and chatted. David was not like Michael at all. When I told him about my work, he listened. Really listened. With refreshing candor, he told tales of his own endeavors, triumphs and setbacks. He asked if he might see me again before heading out to his next conference session. To my astonishment, I said yes. I sat in my office that night and gazed out over the campus. I felt hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time, when the quad was covered in long shadows from the sinking sun. Not only for a possible romance, but also for the chance to create a life that was really mine, free from Lisa's persistent influence and my family's expectations. My mother texted me, "Lisa is having a hard time." And my phone chimed. "Richard is acting irrationally. She requires her sister." I took a good look at the mail before deleting it without replying. After being torched, certain bridges ought to remain burned. Rather, I opened my email and started composing a letter to Michael regarding a joint study project I was considering. I grinned as I typed, recalling how his eyes had brightened when we talked about the possibilities of multidisciplinary study. Perhaps, just possibly, this was the start of something genuine. Something that was exclusively mine, unaffected by the poisonous relationships of my past. Update 1, 6 months have passed since my previous post. Regarding Michael, the architect I actually ran into at the campus cafe, many of you requested an update. That coffee date ended up into something I never would have imagined. Following our first meeting, we began discussing our joint study project over video calls. Over time, these business-related conversations turned into lengthy discussions on anything from childhood dreams to beloved books. Michael found my passion for academics fascinating. In contrast to my family, who always considered it as a weakness. There was no plan for our first actual date. We met to go over the specifics of the project while he was in town for another conference. We both were aware that we were hungry as the meeting was running late. We eventually found ourselves in a small Italian eatery close to campus, where we chatted and shared a plate of pasta until the waiters began stacking seats. I was particularly struck by how different he seemed from David. Michael did more than just skim my most recent research publication when I mentioned it. He read it carefully and returned with insightful questions. With refreshing candor, he discussed his own professional struggles, such as a recent project that had over its budget. When he inquired about my family, it was the true test. His genuine desire prompted me to open up, despite my initial reluctance. I filled him in on everything, including Lisa, my parents' partiality, and yes, the disastrous engagement party. He just listened, without the customary uncomfortable answers or attempts to protect familial relationships. He then showed me that he really understood by sharing his own experience with a competitive brother. Although our joint endeavor is progressing nicely, we have taken care to keep our personal and professional relationships apart. We mostly see each other on the weekends because his department is in a different state. In fact, the distance has been beneficial since it has allowed us to naturally build trust. He asked me to meet his family last weekend. Considering my past, I was afraid, but it was not what I had anticipated. I was welcomed right once by his mother, Linda, who shared stories about Michael's early architectural efforts and showed me his awkward childhood photos. It seems that he once attempted to use his father's power tools to rebuild their garage. "We've heard about your research work," Linda said, pulling me aside, which was the most bizarre moment. "Michael is constantly praising your brilliance." It was expressed with sincere pride and interest rather than comparison or jealousy. I neglected to add that I recently received an offer at work that would allow me to work closer to Michael's university. It's a prominent position that would greatly boost my career. His initial reaction when I informed him about it was, "That's incredible. Describe the research opportunities in detail." I was ecstatic with my accomplishment and said nothing about what it meant for us. I still haven't agreed to the job. I'm hesitant to make significant life adjustments for a romance after everything that happened with my family and David. However, knowing that Michael would be there for me no matter what, I feel for the first time that I can base this choice on what's best for my career. Last week, my grandmother Martha met him and approved of him. "Simply, he sees you," she said. "Not who he wants you to be, but who you are." It has been quiet, to be honest, and I haven't heard from Lisa or my parents in months. Healing sometimes entails letting go of those who don't value you, even if they are family. Update 2. My last update regarding Michael was 3 months ago. I want to share this with the group who helped me get through my worst moments since a lot has transpired. I agreed to work at the university close to Michael's. The change was welcomed by my research team, and we have established a method for remote communication. The main reason the transfer has gone smoothly is that I took my time and properly planned everything. Last weekend, the most significant change occurred. I was in Michael's kitchen preparing dinner with him. Instead of the butter I expected, he was holding a little box when he turned back to retrieve something from the refrigerator. He didn't get down on one knee or give a long speech. "You know how we've been talking about combining lab design with research efficiency," he added instead. "Well, I've also been considering merging our lives. What are your thoughts?" The ring was very different from the gaudy one David had given me. It was exquisite and simple. Michael's following statement, "I know your work is important to you," truly touched me. A matching desk lamp is included with the ring for use during late-night research sessions. "Yes," I said, simultaneously crying and laughing. "We are invited to an engagement celebration by Michael's parents. Regarding it, Linda has been really kind, often asking if I'm okay with the plans. Michael immediately offered that we forgo the party entirely when I hesitated. However, we're having a small gathering. Just close friends and family, because I don't want my past to control my future." Richard, the ex-husband of my former sister, sent me an unexpected email. He said he's doing well with his new companion and praised me. He appears content now that the divorce is official. Hearing from him was strangely therapeutic. Martha, my grandmother, is overjoyed. She gave me a hug and muttered, "This one's a keeper," after I showed her the ring. She is correct. The small things, like how he turned one of his spare rooms into a makeshift home office for me with a whiteboard for research notes, are what show how much Michael cares. Somehow, most likely through extended family, my parents learned about the engagement. Mom left a voicemail stating that they would like to participate in the celebration and make amends. I have not answered. It's preferable to keep some doors closed. Update 3. My engagement update was 2 months ago, and I wish I could report that everything has gone well since then. I must convey the unexpected turn the wedding preparations have taken. At the lakefront home of Michael's family, we were organizing a small ceremony. Linda has been fantastic. She has always respected our wishes while assisting with arrangements. Only family members, close friends and co-workers who truly support us were on the carefully picked guest list. Then I got an email yesterday that really chilled me. According to what my mother wrote, she and dad decided to invite Lisa to the wedding. Their logic? She's your only sister, and family should be together on special days. I called Michael right away. Whatever you want to do, I'm with you, he answered before I could even articulate my panic. We have the day, not them. I was able to think clearly thanks to his cool backing. When I told my grandmother Martha, she became enraged. After everything they've done, she said, they have no right. I knew I had to deal with this on my own, but she offered to run interference. Before sending it, I wrote and revised my response multiple times. Mom and Dad, I made it very plain that I didn't want Lisa to attend my wedding. This cannot be discussed. You won't be accepted either if you're unable to respect this barrier. Elena. Their reaction was expected. About family togetherness, Mom called in tears. Dad wrote a long email about forgiving others and letting go. They even had some family members contact them on their behalf. Michael has had tremendous support from his parents during this time. Linda called to reassure me that only those invited would be allowed entry to the location due to security measures. Michael's brother James volunteered to deal with any unwelcome visitors directly. My research team's support was the most unexpected. They offered to surround me with a protective circle during the wedding after I brought up the matter in a lab meeting, looking agitated. My department director, Dr. Anderson, even offered to accompany me on my wedding. Last night, Michael and I went over our wedding arrangements. If it made me feel safer, he proposed that we alter the location, the date, or even go on an elopement. However, I no longer wish to allow my family's behavior to dictate my decisions. Therefore, we're sticking to our original intentions while taking extra safety measures. Individual QR codes will be included in the invitations, security will be in place at the location, and most importantly, our chosen family and real friends will be present to support us. Last weekend, my grandmother assisted me in choosing my wedding gown. She said something that made me cry as I stood in front of the mirror. Dear, you're gleaming. Because you're at last free to be who you are, not because of the outfit. Though I'm more resilient than I was previously, I'm still anxious about what Lisa might try. There is more to our wedding than just Michael and I becoming husband and wife. It's about choosing genuine love over poisonous familial relationships, happiness over drama, and tranquility over upheaval. Update 4. It took place. Lisa appeared to my wedding wearing an outfit that looked to be meant to attract attention and was obviously pregnant, despite all of our safety procedures and security measures. She had somehow entered through a service entrance thanks to our parents. Linda hurried in with a pale face when I was in the wedding room. I'm very sorry, Elena, she was brought by them. Your mother made a fuss about not excluding an expectant woman when we attempted to stop them. She didn't have to complete. My parents had already put Lisa in the front row, but Michael sent his brother James to deal with the problem right away. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw the same smug expression on her face that I had witnessed at my engagement party with David. I inhaled deeply and turned to face the mirror. My wrist was adorned with a handcrafted bracelet fashioned by my research team, the exquisite clothing grandmother Martha had assisted me in selecting, and Michael's first present to me, a lovely necklace including a little microscope pendant. What do you want to do? When I called Michael, he inquired. They can still be taken out, or we can put it off. I support you no matter what you decide. I realized then that I had allowed them to dictate my happiness all my life. Not today. We're getting married, I stated confidently. They can stay, but I'm done letting them write my story. The ceremony got underway. Dr. Anderson, the director of my department, escorted me down the aisle with pride. Everything else vanished when I saw Michael waiting for me with love and compassion in his eyes. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves. Everyone laughed when Michael pledged to constantly support my scientific endeavors, adding, even if it means converting more rooms into lab space. From peer reviews to late-night science talks, I vowed to be his partner in everything. The reception followed. I believed I was ready for anything, but I was surprised by what transpired next. Lisa pretended to be the maid of honor and got to her feet, holding a glass of champagne. She began by describing how she had saved me from making terrible mistakes, and how she was always looking out for her big sister. Beneath the table, I felt Michael's fingers clasp mine. I noticed my research team stiffening up, poised to step in. Linda was getting up from her chair a little. However, for the first time in my life, I was able to fight my own fights without assistance. Calmly and professionally, as I would have addressed a lecture hall, I stood up, holding my own glass. I think it's time for the bride to make a toast of her own, I replied. What came next? Well, that merits an update of its own. Let's simply say that speaking your truth with dignity might sometimes be the best form of retaliation rather than being silent. Update 5. Here is what transpired when I made my toast after my previous update regarding Lisa attending my wedding. As I stood there, staring at my sister's arrogant face, I experienced an odd feeling of peace. I'd been lecturing academically for years, so I knew how to control a room. I started by saying, "For those who don't know me well, I'm a scientist. We work with truth and facts. So allow me to share some family-related truths." There was a silence in the room. My sister, who was married at the time, was in bed with my then-fiancé 3 years ago. My parents were more concerned with preserving Lisa's reputation than with my wounded heart when I found them. At last, Lisa's smile wavered. Tom, her husband, whom she had brought as a sign of family unity, suddenly got to his feet. His voice was tight as he asked, "The baby, Tom? Is that why you've been avoiding the paternity test?" There was an overwhelming quiet in the room. Lisa placed a protective hand over her growing tummy. I went on, speaking steadily. "There has always been a trend in my family. Lisa's happiness comes first. They pleaded with me to remain silent after she ruined my first engagement. They helped her get in when she arrived here without permission. But today, I said, is about true family, the type that makes you stronger rather than weaker. My research group, who take pride in my accomplishments. Michael's family, who embraced me with unmatched warmth. My grandmother, who never failed to recognize me for who I am." Tom was the first to go. Lisa called his name and ran after him. My mother was crying as my parents followed. The room's atmosphere abruptly lightened when the door closed behind them. Then my grandmother got up and held up her glass. In her own words, "To Elena and Michael. To truth, to real love, and to the family we choose." The remainder of the reception was excellent. Everyone relaxed without the burden of pretense. My study team secretly practiced a surprise dance, which they performed. I found out the following morning that Tom had requested a paternity test and filed for divorce. For once, I didn't feel obligated to assist in picking up the pieces when Lisa's meticulously constructed world fell apart. Update 6. A year has passed since my wedding and the amazing things that happened there. I wanted to give the community that helped me through everything one last update because so much has changed. Michael and I are expecting our first child, which is the major news initially. My first emotion upon seeing the positive test result was one of terror. It brought back memories of my own familial relationships. However, Michael's answer was ideal. He wrapped his arms around me and said, "This kid's going to have the best mom, a brilliant scientist who knows how to love unconditionally." The family of Michael and Linda has been amazing. Linda was thrilled about my latest research article as well as the baby when we told them. "This child is going to have such an amazing role model," she remarked, describing my work in the journal. I've heard tidbits of information regarding Lisa's situation from my grandmother Martha. Tom's suspicion that the baby wasn't his was validated by the paternity test. She is currently trying to start again while living with our parents. The reality of being a single mother has replaced the opulent lifestyle and fancy clothing. I occasionally have a slight sense of sadness, not precisely guilt, for the way things turned out. Michael's statement, "Consequences aren't cruel, they're just truth in action," comes to mind next. I'm doing well with my research. Michael and I worked together to build a new laboratory, and the university recently granted money for it. His inventive architecture and my research needs make for the ideal combination of our skills. Our work collaboration has only improved our friendship on a personal level. In my new lab, our baby will have a dedicated space, a secure enclosed play area, where they may be close to me as I work. Michael created it himself, adding all the safety features he could think of while still making it engaging for a child's growth. My circumstances haven't changed much, but I have. I no longer feel the need to compete for attention or prove myself. In our household, there is no hierarchy of love or success, only mutual understanding, support, and sincere joy in one another's accomplishments. Grandmother Martha, who is thrilled to be a great-grandmother, comes to visit frequently. She's already crocheting the baby little lab jackets while entertaining us with tales of my own early science projects. Even now, my parents still make an effort to connect, generally through family. I'm not ready, but they want to be involved in their grandchild's life. Some wounds require real change rather than just time to heal. As I reflect on my path, I see that responsibility or blood relationships aren't the key to creating a meaningful family. It's about finding people that love you for who you are, celebrate your happiness, and encourage your aspirations. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who supported me and followed my tale. Although life isn't flawless, it is genuinely and delightfully mine.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My daughter was invited to perform at her cousin's wedding but was later smeared online because her performance drew more attention than the bride. My F49 cousin, F23, asked my daughter, F16, to perform at her wedding reception, but became bitter upon seeing the positive reception to her act. She has since posted about her online, and my daughter is considering quitting original post. I hope this is okay to share here. The reason I'm posting is because of my daughter who's been hurting in the aftermath of a recent performance. I'm sorry in advance for how long this turned out, but any advice from fellow aerialists would be greatly appreciated. My cousin Dana, not real name, had her wedding 2 weeks ago, and she asked if my daughter could perform at her reception. My daughter, Jane, also fake name, has practiced Silk's Lyra for the past few years at a nearby circus studio, and she's also performed with through the studio at small gigs. She hopes to continue into adulthood and become a professional teacher, but this recent incident has shaken her confidence. She has a private Instagram to document her progress performances, and I only post certain performances on my Facebook. Her first gig with the studio and her first recital to name a few we're proud of. Some of our relatives saw her performances through my socials, and they watched her perform at her studio's Christmas recital when we hosted Christmas at our home a few years back. Something that surprised her when they visited early to see her. I love how they coordinated that, and Jane said it was her loudest cheering section to date. Dana was one of the relatives who came up early to see her Christmas recital, and she's always been super supportive. She asked me if Jane would be willing to perform at the reception, and I asked on her behalf. Jane was honored and excited when I did, and we already had a portable rig for her too. Though we ended up renting a taller one from her studio. Dana got the idea from a YouTube video featuring an aerialist who performed at a wedding reception, and she showed us while requesting white silks and a white outfit. We scoped out the venue and purchased white silks along with a white costume that Dana approved of, and Jane was really excited throughout. Jane even worked on choreography to a song that Dana requested, and she put a lot of time into it, even asking one of her coaches to help her with it. Dana insisted on paying her for the gig despite Jane not expecting to be paid, and she paid her a few hundred. However, Dana's had a change of heart. Jane received a standing ovation after her performance that surprised her, but we didn't know anything was wrong until Dana went on Facebook a few days later. Dana said she didn't approve of the outfit Jane wore and that she specifically told her to not wear white. She also said my husband and I pressured her to have Jane perform and that the performance gave off an unclassy vibe, lies that my husband and I couldn't believe. We sent Dana numerous costume links, and we purchased the one she liked. There was also nothing wrong with Jane's performance. Dana was one of the people cheering afterwards. Jane received nothing but compliments afterward, but I'm disgusted that she had to see that post after all the work she put into it. The post also had comments disabled for what it's worth. I called Dana to confront her about the lies, but she didn't pick up numerous calls. I then called her parents who, like us, had received messages about her post, and they said that Dana was wrong. They apologized on her behalf and said they were also disgusted. Dana's mom also said that Dana vented to her before making her post a few days after the reception. Dana told her she regretted asking Jane to perform given the attention, compliments and cheers she received for it. Her mom also said that she felt upstaged with Jane wearing white and having to hear how good she was. Dana's parents tried to call her after she made her post, but she didn't answer after their previous conversation ended with her parents telling her she shouldn't be bitter because she specifically asked Jane to perform. Dana's parents reported the post along with us/others, and we've told the truth to those who reached out along with a post to explain our side, stand up for Jane. We have text proof of sending costume links that Dana chose from. Dana's parents also requested to talk to Jane on the phone to apologize for Dana's behavior, and my husband and I told Jane that Dana was wrong, and that we'll be distancing ourselves from Dana permanently. Dana's parents were surprised at her behavior, and we were too having seen her grow up. Granted, we only see extended family for Thanksgiving and Christmas because we live far, but other relatives were surprised too as it seemed to come from left field. Maybe there's a side of Dana we'll never know from our limited holiday, milestone interactions, but our focus is Jane. We've tried to cheer Jane up by offering to take her to dinner among other activities, but she's been hurting, which is why I'm here. Jane hasn't practiced, at home or the studio, since the reception. And I don't want to invade her space at her studio by telling anyone there, in case she doesn't want anyone to know. She asked me to return the white silks and costume after being so excited to receive them. She also said she's going to take an extended break from aerial photography to reconsider if she wants to continue. Aside from aerial photography, she's taken a break from seeing non-aerial friends too, choosing to pretty much keep to herself. We would appreciate any advice from fellow aerialists on how to lift her spirits. We remind her of how we're proud of her, along with the many compliments she received, but she's asked for space and to not talk about it. We're going to respect that and let time do its thing, but we'll consider any advice from other aerialists who can relate to the time and work she put in. Sorry for this being so long, but we appreciate anyone who reads and takes the time to reply. Comments from the first post. Some meat with skin. This is a rare story on this site where everyone, except the villain, does everything right. If this happened to an adult or even an older teenager, she would probably still be hurt, but be able to see that Dana is the one with the issue. But at 16, she's still forming her idea of herself. It sounds like she's taking this all on as a reflection of herself. I'm not someone who can be in the spotlight. My desire to perform hurts my family. I would really consider therapy. You could say all the right things to her, and I bet you have, but at 16 it's hard to hear your mom. Alternatively, and I'm sorry to say this, but is it possible that Dana's new husband gave Jane any inappropriate attention? That might explain why Dana is so upset when she presumably should have known exactly what to expect, although certainly wouldn't excuse it. If there were any opportunities for Jane and the new husband to be alone, I would really look into that also, because it would also explain why Jane hasn't practiced since the reception, even though the drama started a few days later. It is an extreme place to go, but I would just ask yourself if there was an opportunity for him to be inappropriate, because she is withdrawing from her entire social life. When I was a teenager, driving up to the next city helped me sometimes. Want to take a drive? Is still a question I ask myself when I feel stuck and hopeless. Go to the big aquarium and get cannolis at the outlet mall or something equally random. Maybe she'll open up or get out of her head, or maybe y'all will just have a nice day. Lots of love to you and your family. Mistral 19. Jealousy is horrible, and Dana has just made herself look bad to anyone that came to the wedding. Also, just for reference, I have performed at multiple weddings and have always had a white costume. It suits the theme and is no way comparable to a wedding dress. Leslie Barbnope. I always see aerialists in white at weddings. Take comfort in the internet OP, and hopefully they can use it as a defense with Dana. If she wants to be that way, just post the receipts of how she asked her what to wear, etc. If she's willing to say that for a 16-year-old. Or let it go, it'll pass, because I promise Dana will have some new crazy thing to do very soon. These types always do. Chelsea Sphere 89. The bride is petty, immature and ridiculous. First off, you must see that. Help her see it too if she doesn't already. When people show you who they are, listen. This is a painful, but valuable lesson that your daughter is learning very early in her performance teaching career. Just like any obstacle or difficulty in life standing between us and the things we desire, she has the choice to either let it beat her down, or let it lift her up and make more determined than ever. If she truly wants this and does eventually go on to be an aerial coach and/or performer, she will face even more challenges. This is only serving to prepare her to face those. Making art is vulnerable. Sometimes people won't like it. But that tells you more about them than about you most of the time. We'll love dogs. Dana wanted her wedding to be all about her, which is fair to an extent, but obviously not to this extent, and I think she was happy to have a beautiful performance done for her, but forgot that people will congratulate the performer, rather than the person who hired the performer. Given how extreme the response was, I would be a bit worried what someone else mentioned about the outside chance that Dana's husband said did something inappropriate, but my guess, and hope, is it's just a general attention thing. Regardless, it sounds like you and Dana's parents are handling things as best you can. Defending your daughter but respecting her privacy and boundaries sounds exactly like the right thing to do. Well done you. I would just continue to be there for your daughter in a low-pressure way and make sure she knows she has safe people to talk to whenever she's ready. Maybe see if there are any non-aerial activities any of her friends are down to do with her. Maybe something like rock climbing, which can feel less performance-oriented and attention-grabbing but can still feel fun for an aerialist because there's a fair amount of strength crossover. Hopefully she'll be comfortable with aerial photography again in future, but I think just trying to help her not socially withdraw too much would be good for her well-being for now. So sorry she's going through this. She sounds like a great kid and a very talented aerialist. Update. Before I get into what's happened since my last post, I want to thank everyone who took the time to comment. 2 pieces of advice really stood out, and I'll get to them shortly. Since my original post, Dana's Facebook post is gone. I don't know if she deleted it or enough people reported it for Facebook to remove it, but we're glad it's gone. She never apologized to us, or Jane, or even bothered to call, so our position on being permanently done with Dana stands. My husband and I made a post on my Facebook addressing the lies she spewed about our daughter, and we shared photo proof of Dana's text where she approved of Jane's white costume from links we sent, not to mention the song choice she sent us too. Better yet, Dana's mother reposted it on her account, which really surprised me. Dana's mother wrote that they loved Jane's act and that they disapproved of Dana's actions. My husband and I also made sure that Jane was okay with us addressing it on Facebook, and she said it was fine. Normally, I wouldn't use Facebook to address drama if aimed at me, but since this involves a grown adult attacking a minor, we felt the need to address it publicly because she disparaged her publicly, and Jane will remember whether we stood up for her or not years from now. I had a chance to speak with Dana's mother since my original post on the phone, and she spoke to Dana again after our last call. Dana reiterated how she regretted asking Jane to perform, but she harped on the standing ovation that bothered her the most. Dana told her that she expected Jane to get some polite applause, but that the overwhelming response really set her over the edge because she expected the loudest cheers to be when she and her husband entered the reception, but that went to Jane instead. Dana and her husband also received a great reception when they entered the reception, but Jane's performance did too, and Dana didn't expect it. Heck, even Jane was surprised by it too. She never received a standing ovation from a solo act before. But Dana's mother believes that if Dana had asked someone to sing who received a similar reception, Dana's jealousy would have been all the same. Someone suggested seeing if Jane would be interested in speaking to a therapist given how hurtful Dana's comments could be for a teen, and Jane said she's open to it so long as it isn't a counselor at school because, as of now, she doesn't want anyone at school or her studio to know about the incident, and she vaguely told the coach who helped her choreograph that it went fine. We will respect her privacy request as it's her right to control the narrative. But in the same vein, I suggested therapy for Dana to Dana's mother since her reaction might be a bigger insecurity, and she said she'd ask. The other thing someone suggested was the possibility of Dana's husband, or anyone, making an inappropriate comment to Jane during the reception that made her shut down and not want to see friends or practice days before Dana's post. My husband decided to ask her, and Jane said no when he did. If something happened, perhaps she'd be more comfortable telling a therapist with time. But on the bright side, she said she might want to try a different aerial studio because she doesn't want to answer questions about how it went, or share a video, at her home studio, so we will help her find somewhere new as she asked. We hope she doesn't permanently leave her current studio because she has friends and coaches who are supportive, and she performs with that studio's troupe at festivals, gigs. But I personally understand the need to sometimes go somewhere where nobody knows you for a break, and we hope that that will help her. She hasn't said definitely yet. But if we do, we'll take her. She still wants an extended break from aerial photography in the meantime. But even if when she goes back, she said she may never want to perform again and would rather do it leisurely. One of the reasons she doesn't want to return to her home studio where she's a part of their troupe. She asked if we'd tell her troupe coach that she won't perform with them anymore if it comes to it. And if that's what she wants down the road, then we will. Hopefully time heals this wound and helps her at least keep the friends she has there, but we can only hope. Comments from the update. Fluffykins_pie. I'm so glad that you and the rest of the family are backing Jane up as much as possible. Hopefully the support you show her now will eventually win out over Dana's hateful behavior. I also hope that Dana actually gets therapy, because going after a minor like that was beyond out of line. Maybe the suggestion coming from her own mom will make Dana reevaluate and make some changes. But regardless, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job parenting. I'm so sorry this happened, but the absolute best thing you can do is just keep showing Jane that you have her back and it's her decision what she decides to do from here. We'd be happy to have her back if and when she decides to return to the aerial community. Half Angel. I can see the positives in here that have happened since the last post. Thank you for updating. I have been thinking of you all. It does sound like Jane is still blaming herself and that will need unlocking as that mindset could spill over into other aspects of her life, stopping her achieving her full potential. She needs to realize that this is bridezilla jealousy that got directed towards her, nothing to do with her, and if an aunt had received that attention it too would have got squashed. Perhaps angling her to perform is fine, just never a family wedding again. And please ask her again in a few weeks' time if any inappropriate comments were made or done. Sometimes it can take a while to feel comfortable enough to say it out loud. It's not uncommon for boys to take 30 years before they say something. I feel like her coach needs to know that the performance was amazing, but to know that there was fallout afterwards. They don't need to know exactly, but it will help explain the actions and ease the road back there for Jane. Please give her a big hug from me. Now to the next story, story 2. I child-proofed for my in-laws visit, but my husband thought I was overreacting. Now he's gone further after day 1 with our nephew. Original post, I am at 26 F, and my husband is 29 M. We have been married for 5 years and we went to Berlin right after marriage since we both found really well-paying jobs. Meanwhile, both of our families, parents, siblings, etc., still live back in Greece and we usually visit back occasionally. Now me and my husband don't have any children and we don't plan to have any. We enjoy buying expensive things and experiencing things we never got to as children, such as nice furniture in our home, going to exotic restaurants with friends, travel, hobbies, and generally just our lives with each other exactly the way it is. But that's just how my husband thinks. His family is very traditional and every married couple has at least one kid. This time my husband invited my Bill and CL to visit us with their 3-year-old son for 2 weeks. This would be the first time they've traveled with their son and the first time we would be hosting our nephew at our home. Now our nephew is known to be going through the terrible twos and has been throwing tantrums and breaking things lately, so I did some childproofing in our home a day before my in-laws were due to arrive. I removed all the glass and ceramic decor. I swapped out our linen tablecloth for a plastic one. I locked up our intoxication devices. I also covered our sofas with a plushy fabric cover. Our sofa's fabric is white cashmere, because my nephew likes to snack while watching TV and we can always take it outside and dust off food crumbs. I also changed my maid's schedule to come in 5 days a week instead of 3 so she can help prepare breakfast and make sure the house is tidy. However, when my husband saw all of my changes, he kind of got upset. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people, and asked me why I don't make these changes when our friends in Berlin who have kids come over for dinner. He also said that he's never seen our friends make these sorts of changes in their own home for their kids. I don't understand this comparison at all. Coming over for dinner for 3 hours and staying at a place for a couple of weeks is very different. And we've visited our in-laws enough to see how chaotic their home can get, to the point where my Bill and SIL keep mostly plastic items in their homes for convenience. AITA. Top comments. Tulip afternoon, NTA. Instead of worrying the entire visit that their kid could ruin something expensive, the visiting parents can rest assured that the space has been child-proofed. As long as all the changes don't make the space uncomfortable, for example squeaky plastic couch covers or all decor being hidden so the place is bare, I think it makes a lot of sense. You are making the visit less stressful for everyone. Horror reveal 7618. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people. He's quoting the definition of a toddler here. OOP is voted NTA Update 1. Same post. Edit. We hadn't spoken since we had our fight last night and my in-laws are supposed to be landing in the morning. My husband brought food from a restaurant I liked and told me he wanted to apologize. He told me he overreacted because he wasn't admitting to himself how different his brother is as a person ever since he became a dad, and that his life is going in a very different direction with more financial hardships too, and that makes him angry and helpless. He told me he misdirected his frustration at me and thought what I did was really nice, especially since he is more finicky than I am. I tried my best to make him feel not guilty and responsible for the lives and decisions of other grown-ups. But I'm so relieved he came around on his own. Update 2. Same post. Edit 2. So guys, it's officially day 1 of the in-laws visit and my husband has now gone an extra step and put away most of the lamps in our house because they are glass and super dangerous for a toddler to be around. We have about 35 'cause we hate ceiling lights. When we picked up our in-laws from the airport and were driving them back, my nephew accidentally poured a bag of chips all over the back seat and floor mats. Everyone just laughed, but I know my husband was horrified inside, and now he's been vacuuming the backseat area for 2 hours now, LOL. Oh, and in-laws super appreciated our baby proofing.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My parents kicked me out because of my sister. 6 years later, they're asking for help to support her and her 4 young children. I, 32F, am currently in charge of significant commercial development projects around New England as a successful architect at a prominent Boston firm. Nathan, a 34-year-old man who works as a project manager in sustainable development, is my fiancé. Our wedding is scheduled for the following year. On the surface, my life appears to be ideal. I have rewarding work, a wonderful relationship, and a lovely craftsman-style home that I designed extensive modifications for. However, I'm questioning everything because of a complex family situation that recently reached a breaking point. I must go into great depth about my family history in order for you to comprehend the current circumstance. I was raised in a Connecticut suburb in an upper-middle-class household. My mother, Phoebe, 56F, taught high school at a private school until she left 6 years ago, and my father, Richard, 58M, works as a corporate lawyer at a reputable business. Ashley, my younger sister, who is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, has always been the star of our family. Favoritism was evident from my earliest recollections, even if my parents would strongly dispute it if questioned. I received consecutive A's on my report card when I was 8 and Ashley was 6, and I was simply informed, "That's expected of you?" While Ashley received B's and was commended and brought out for ice cream because she was trying her best. Throughout our childhood, this trend persisted. Ashley's meager efforts were widely praised, while my accomplishments were anticipated and frequently disregarded. When I was 15, I recall one specific occurrence. I had been working on my design project for months, frequently staying up until 2 in the morning, in preparation for a national high school architectural competition. I received a minor scholarship as a result of placing second nationally. Ashley had an ordinary soccer match that day, so my parents didn't even make it to the award ceremony. "That's nice," they replied, barely taking their eyes off the TV as I brought my award home, before turning back to Ashley's dramatic account of how she nearly scored a goal. Even though my parents were clearly biased, I did well in school and in my personal life. I led multiple community service projects, kept a 4.0 GPA, and served as president of the student body. In the meantime, as Ashley approached adolescence, her actions became more alarming. When she began to slip out when I was 14, my parents told me to keep a better eye on her. She was caught stealing high-end makeup when she was 15, and they accused me of not providing her my allowance money even though she clearly needed it. The assumption that I should put Ashley's needs and interests ahead of my own was the most annoying aspect, not only the partiality. My part-time job at a local design firm, where I made coffee and filed papers, allowed me to save up $3,000 when I was 16. I intended to use it for a Columbia University summer architecture course. My parents, however, borrowed my cash to assist cover the repairs after Ashley, who wasn't supposed to be driving, smashed her boyfriend's car. They never fulfilled their commitment to reimburse me. I lost the chance to improve my college applications and the summer program opportunity. I was able to gain admission to a prominent architectural program in spite of these obstacles. In order to save money, my parents agreed to let me live at home while I was in college and to assist with my tuition. They wanted me around to assist handle Ashley, who was now in high school and becoming more disobedient by the day, so this wasn't totally selfless. I recall making several attempts to speak with Ashley about her actions. One exchange is particularly memorable. 3 months or so passed before everything collapsed. At 3 in the morning on a school night, I discovered her slinking back into the house. Assisting Ashley to climb through the window, I whispered, "Ashley, you need to be more careful. You're in your senior year, and colleges look at more than just grades." She retorted, "Stop trying to be mom. Just because your life is boring and all about buildings doesn't mean mine has to be." In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. Ashley spent a lot of time with Tyler, her 17-year-old ex-boyfriend, who was known for being trouble. My parents viewed everyone I dated with extreme mistrust, yet they were surprisingly lenient about their relationship. My mother accused me of being envious of Ashley's vibrant social life when I attempted to voice my concerns about Tyler. 6 years ago, everything drastically altered. One day, Ashley, a senior in high school at the time, came home and declared she was expecting a child. The father was Tyler. I can still clearly recall that night. Ashley sitting on the couch with a look of fear and defiance on her face, my father pacing the living room, and my mother sobbing uncontrollably. In the confusion that ensued, my parents somehow twisted the facts to accuse me of failing to keep a closer eye on her. My mother arrived in my room the following day with news that would forever alter my course in life. Without even looking at him, she stated, "You have to move out by the end of the week." I couldn't understand. What? Why? With Tyler moving in and a baby on the way, the house isn't large enough for all of us. Ashley needs your space. One approach to support your sister at this trying period would be to move out. I made an effort to reason with her. During my 3rd year of college, I worked part-time at a nearby architecture business and maintained a 3.9 GPA. She insisted on finding me a cheap apartment close to university, even though I just requested for a few months. The worst thing was when my father summoned me to his home office the next day. He delivered another hit while seated behind his enormous oak desk, which he had always used to frighten clients. "We won't be able to continue paying your tuition," he stated in a cold, clinical tone. "That money is necessary for Ashley and the child. You'll figure something out since you're intelligent." I stood there looking at the man who had always emphasized the value of education and accountability, suddenly severing his daughter's ties after she had done everything correctly. The irony hurt. I packed my things that evening. My father stopped me in the driveway as I was packing the final box into my car. I briefly believed that he might reconsider. Rather, he gave me a piece of paper with a list of local women's shelters on it. He said, just in case, and went back inside. The next phase of my life was the darkest. For 4 months, I lived in my car and, for safety, parked every night in a different Walmart lot. In the architecture firm where I worked part-time, I would change in public toilets, take a shower in the campus gym, and keep my business attire in my locker. I took a second job working as a late-night barista, frequently juggling multiple jobs while attending classes. I asked a few family members for assistance, but they all turned me down. My 53-year-old Aunt Susan, who had always expressed her pride in my accomplishments, informed me that she didn't want to become embroiled in family strife. According to my grandparents, they were too old to handle the matter. I occasionally went days without eating a decent meal, barely making it on protein bars and coffee. I frequently slept off at my desk while working on my homework in the college library, which was open 24 hours a day. I kept my GPA the same in spite of everything. My escape was architecture. I put all of my suffering and willpower into my designs. My parents never once called to see whether I was still alive during this time. Ashley didn't either. After learning that she had given birth to a boy, I made one phone call, but it was awkward and short. After that, there was no communication for 6 years. I had to start over in my life throughout those 6 years. Despite working 60-hour weeks and living in my car and then a small room in a dubious area of town, I finished with honors. A famous Boston business was interested in my final thesis project, which was a design for a sustainable community center with transitional housing that received multiple prizes. Living in a small studio apartment and trying to save as much money as I could, I began my career as an entry-level architect. Every advancement was a triumph over my past. I was managing my own projects for 4 years. My area of expertise was sustainable commercial development, and I gained recognition for my creative ideas that put the needs of people and the environment first. 3 years ago, Nathan and I met at a seminar on sustainable development. During the Q&A portion of his presentation on green construction projects, I disputed one of his claims. He invited me to continue the conversation over coffee rather than becoming defensive. Dinner evolved from that coffee into the most wholesome and encouraging relationship I've ever experienced. Nathan is well aware of my background. He was present when I purchased my first home after getting expelled. When I signed the paperwork and broke down because I was so overcome by the fact that I finally had a place where no one could make me leave, he held me. He supported my idea to refurbish it and make it an environment that reflected all of my accomplishments over the years. Through mutual contacts, I occasionally learned tidbits about Ashley's life. Shortly after the birth of their baby, she wed Tyler, but the two of them split up after 6 months. By that time, she was expecting her second kid, but the father had entirely vanished after learning of the pregnancy. She had another kid with Marcus, the man she married 2 years later, but their marriage failed when she had an affair. She is now pregnant once more and doesn't seem to know who the father is. I got a call yesterday from an unidentified number right before bed. After 6 years of stillness, my mother called. She initially pretended nothing had happened, inquiring about my life and showing interest in my accomplishments. I briefly felt like that young child again, excited to tell my mother about my achievements. I even began to tell her about my recent promotion to senior architect and my engagement. Then she revealed the true reason she had called. In order to assist Ashley and her kids, my parents want me to return to Connecticut. They say they're too old to care for 4 small children, and my father will shortly be retiring. They even had the gall to claim that, as the successful sister, it is my duty to support the family. My mother said, "You've always been the responsible one," with that cunning tone I so vividly remembered in her voice. Now more than ever, Ashley needs her big sister. Family must remain united. A chilly chuckle erupted within me. Family have to stick together? I said it again. When I was sleeping in my car, where was this family? When I was barely eating and working 2 jobs? When there was nobody for me to turn to? I went on despite my mother's attempt to stop me. "You absolutely abandoned me, kicked me out, and stopped paying for my schooling in order to help Ashley. You expect me to sacrifice my life, career, and relationship in order to clean up your mess once more now that she has continued to make bad decisions and you're sick of dealing with the fallout?" I hung up after telling her that I would never again risk my life for Ashley. Since then, family members who turned down my request for assistance 6 years ago have been bombarding my phone with messages accusing me of being callous and asserting that family helps family. Nathan completely agrees with my decision to uphold my boundaries, but other people argue that since they are still family and retaliation won't mend old hurts, I should at least have a meeting with them. But this doesn't seem like vindictiveness to me. I saw it as defending the life I created on my own, after being deserted by those who were meant to keep me safe. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their tremendous support and wisdom. My phone has been buzzing nonstop with messages from extended family members for the past 48 hours, which has been very taxing. The circumstances have changed in unexpected ways. My mother wrote me a long email detailing Ashley's children's daily problems, along with comprehensive pictures of my nieces and nephews. The oldest, who is currently in kindergarten, is exhibiting early behavioral problems. The second child's health issues necessitate regular medical care. Another is on the way, while the third is still a toddler. A communication from an old family friend who teaches at Ashley's old high school was what really got to me. She informed me that in order to pay for Ashley's costs and medical bills, my parents have been taking out loans. My father has delayed his retirement indefinitely, and they have already remortgaged their home. Ashley personally sent a direct message, which was the most unexpected development. She reached out for the first time in 6 years, not to apologize but to let her big sister know that she had changed and needed her. She talked about acknowledging her past sins and is attending therapy. Although I've seen this pattern before, I still have a part of me that wants to believe her. In order to keep both physical and emotional distance from the family, my fiancé Nathan proposed a compromise, providing financial support for the kids' schooling through a trust fund. It's an intriguing idea that would enable me to assist the defenseless kids without being embroiled in the family strife. All of this is still registering in my mind. Seeing those pictures of the children, who are innocent in all of this, has made me feel conflicted, even though my logical side knows I owe them nothing. When I make a choice about Nathan's suggestion, I'll provide another update. I need some time right now to process everything without having to deal with family pressure all the time. Update 2. Over the last 24 hours, everything has drastically changed. My mother called me in an emergency last night. Ashley had been involved in a severe vehicle accident. Another automobile ran a red light and collided with her car while she was driving alone. The situation was dire because she was pregnant. I got into my car and drove to Connecticut for 4 hours without giving it any thought. It felt unreal to enter that hospital. As he paced the corridor in his faded suit, my father appeared to be much older than his years. When she saw me, my mother lost it all. I hadn't actually seen them in person for 6 years. Although Ashley's injuries were not life-threatening because of the airbags, the doctors added, they had to perform an emergency C-section in order to save the baby. With a questionable prognosis, the premature baby is currently in the NICU. My biggest surprise was going back to the house I grew up in. I grudgingly complied with my parents' request that I remain rather than book a hotel. Entering my former room felt like entering a time portal. My old desk was still in its original condition, my architecture designs were still attached to the walls, and even my high school trophies were still neatly arranged. Everything was just as I had left it 6 years prior. Then it dawned on me that they hadn't actually converted my room into an area for Ashley. The whole needing the room pretext had been nothing more than a pretext. Another unanticipated emotional moment was meeting my nieces and nephews. I was astonished to hear Charlie, 6 million, the oldest, say, "Aunt Rebecca, I know you from the pictures." My parents had apparently informed them about their aunt, who constructs stunning structures, in spite of everything. After I assisted them in building a block tower, the smaller ones, Ava, 4F, and Lucas, 2M, who had been timid at first, quickly warmed up. After 3 days here, I'm learning new things that make my emotions even more complicated. I discovered a stack of unsent letters from my father while searching through some old documents for Ashley's insurance information. They were letters of apologies that he never mailed, all addressed to me and dated throughout the previous 6 years. Tears appeared to have soiled several of them. Yesterday, Nathan flew in to help me get through this. I became aware of how much these children deserve to be free from the chaos they were born into as I watched him engage with my nieces and nephew, using play to teach them basic engineering concepts. Ashley is still in and out of consciousness, but she is stable presently. The baby's condition is still dire. Although I've taken an emergency leave of absence, I have some important project deadlines to attend to in Boston next week. How I feel about things is still a mystery to me. My fury is still there, but it's mixed up with other feelings I can't quite put my finger on. The youngsters who somehow know about me, the preserved chamber, and the unsent letters are all making me rethink how I perceive the previous 6 years. I have to return to the hospital right now to get an update on the baby's health. Next week, when I return to Boston, I will write more. I'm just attempting to live day by day for the time being. Update 3. After spending another week in Connecticut, this time with Nathan, I just got back to Boston. It was a complex experience. Ashley asked me to invite him expressly because she wanted to meet the person who makes her sister happy. The dynamics were revealing and unpleasant. I made a startling discovery while we were there. I discovered years' worth of Ashley's treatment records while assisting my mother with organizing some medical paperwork. My parents never disclosed to me that she had been dealing with bipolar disorder since she was in her teens. Manic episodes occurred at the same time as the numerous pregnancies and relationship problems. This information adds another level of complexity to the process, but it does not justify the way they treated me. The most pivotal event occurred when I spoke with Ashley privately in her hospital room. She was more lucid than I had seen her in years, most likely as a result of taking her medications as prescribed following the accident. She acknowledged that, even in high school, she had envied my success and security. "You made everything look so easy," she stated. And I felt like the family disappointment in comparison. Neither of us missed the irony. Nathan's presence proved to be quite important. I was too deeply invested to notice what he saw. One evening at supper, he pointed out that my father was unable to look me in the eye, displaying signals of intense embarrassment instead of the apathy I had always imagined. Additionally, he saw my mother's tense tendency to begin statements and then stop them quickly, seemingly out of fear of saying the wrong thing. The children now play a big role in my emotional equation. Charlie, 6 million, my oldest nephew, showed me his architectural drawings, which were sloppy but sincere attempts to replicate images of my work that my parents must have shown him. When the younger ones, Ava, 4F, and Lucas, 2M, begin referring to Nathan as uncle, it has a deeper impact on him than he anticipated. The infant will need to remain in the NICU for at least another month, although her condition has stabilized. My parents have been sleeping in the waiting area on shifts, refusing to leave their grandchildren alone, according to a nurse who spoke to us during one of our hospital stays. They appear emotionally and physically worn out. I've made some sensible choices. A family therapist with expertise in intergenerational trauma is what I'm setting up. I've also discussed working remotely for a few days every month with my company. I haven't changed my mind about returning to Connecticut though. I now live and work in Boston. On the way back to Boston, Nathan and I had a lengthy conversation. His statement, "Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't forgiving others. It's forgiving yourself for still caring," really resonated with me. I've been feeling bad about not being able to control my rage in its purest, protective form, so this really spoke to me. I have a crucial client meeting tomorrow, so I must concentrate. Strangely, at the moment, routine work duties feel both anchoring and inconsequential. After our first family therapy appointment, which is set for next week, I'll provide another update. Update 4. Something important happened during my parents' trip to Boston last weekend, so I had to write this update. You read correctly. They traveled to Boston ostensibly to talk about important issues pertaining to the family situation. I initially consented to meet them in a neutral setting, a peaceful cafe close to the public garden. But they persisted in touring my residence because they claimed to be interested in learning more about my life. I reluctantly consented after speaking with Nathan and establishing explicit guidelines on the length of their stay. It was surprising how they responded to my house. Normally stoic, my father broke down when he saw my architecture awards in my home office. However, their true purpose caught me completely off guard. They produced paperwork that demonstrated they had been covertly putting money aside for me ever since they expelled me. I've never witnessed my father sobbing so much in my life. He clarified that for 6 years, they had established a different savings account and contributed the amount equal to my college tuition each month. It has grown to a significant amount with interest. Their justification? They intended to leave it in their will because they were too embarrassed to deal with me personally. A fierce confrontation resulted from this revelation. I let out years' worth of suppressed rage because I could no longer contain it. "Do you think money can fix what you did?" I yelled. "I lived in my vehicle. I didn't eat. I tried to keep up my grades by working till I was worn out." My father then made a statement that really stopped me cold. "We don't expect forgiveness," he stated. "We just want you to know that your suffering has haunted us every single day." He then showed me his diary, which detailed all of my accomplishments that he had followed over the years via social media and professional networks. He mentioned my advancements, my first significant project, and even the Sustainable Design Prize I received the previous year. After sobbing quietly, my mother finally opened out about Ashley's past mental health issues. Evidently, they had observed similar behavioral tendencies in Ashley's early years but disregarded the warning signs in favor of managing me as the stable child. She acknowledged that their parenting style had been completely incorrect. When they mentioned their most recent worries, the topic of conversation changed. They disclosed that Marcus, Ashley's ex-husband, is attempting to obtain full custody of their child by using the accident and Ashley's history of mental illness. Just as she is beginning to stabilize with her new medicine regimen, they are concerned that this could lead to another breakdown. This is when the situation becomes complex. I'm no longer being asked to relocate back. Rather, they are asking me to assist them in locating a reputable mental health center in Boston for Ashley and the child after she is discharged from the NICU. In order to assist with the other children while Ashley receives the care she needs, they wish to sell their Connecticut home and relocate closer. Nathan, who remained close by to provide assistance if necessary, subsequently made a significant observation. They're finally acknowledging their mistakes and trying to find actual solutions instead of just dumping responsibilities on you. I'm still taking it all in. Although the money they save doesn't change the past, their persistent covert efforts at making amends reveal a level of regret I hadn't previously thought of. My father's journal seems like a heartbreaking reminder of what might have been, a father who was proud of his daughter's accomplishments but was too embarrassed to say so out loud. To learn more about Ashley's custody dispute and what part, if any, I should play in it, I'm meeting with a family law lawyer tomorrow. Additionally, I'm looking into psychiatric hospitals that focus in postpartum mental health treatment. Regarding my assistance with Ashley's treatment plans, I have not responded to them. Although I have a strong desire to uphold rigid limits, I also acknowledge that this could be an opportunity for genuine, structural change in our family's dynamic. This time, with the right boundaries and expert assistance, things could be different. Once I've decided how I want to participate in these new developments, I'll provide another update. Update 5. I've made some decisions regarding my relationship with my family going forward after giving it a lot of thought and attending multiple family therapy sessions. Initially, in response to my parents' inquiry concerning Ashley's care, I assisted them in locating a respectable mental health and postpartum care center in Boston. I did, however, clarify that my participation would be strictly limited and professional. Although I will not be personally involved in Ashley's daily care, I was able to connect them with the resources they needed through my professional network. My parents' savings account has been transformed into a trust fund, of which I am the trustee, for Ashley's children's education. This arrangement guarantees that the funds will be utilized suitably while upholding professional boundaries. Nathan used his financial planning and contacts to assist put things up. I never imagined how my relationship with my family would change over time. I've developed a methodical approach to keeping in touch that safeguards my personal well-being, even if I won't be returning to Connecticut or taking on any caregiving duties. We've decided to continue family therapy sessions and have frequent video chats with the kids, with Ashley being contacted directly only in case of emergencies. Even though my mother still calls a lot, I've seen a big shift in the way she handles things. She no longer makes demands or guilt trips before providing family information, and she respects my limits when I tell her that I'm too busy to talk. My father made the most unexpected revelation. In addition to sending me a formal written apology outlining particular occasions in which he failed me as a father, he began visiting his own therapist. Instead of the cliched, "I'm sorry for everything," I had anticipated, I received a considerate acknowledgement of particular negative behaviors and how they affected my life. After being admitted to the treatment center, Ashley is beginning to show recovery. At last, the infant is well and no longer in the NICU. I've made arrangements for a child psychologist to work with her older children to help them deal with these changes while I keep an emotional distance. I've decided not to include my family too much in our wedding arrangements, which Nathan and I are moving forward with. Although they will be invited as guests, friends who helped me through my darkest moments will play the customary family roles in the wedding. I am content with my choices as I look to the future. It's a carefully planned relationship that safeguards my mental health while recognizing the intricacy of familial ties, even though it's not the total reunion some might expect for. I've discovered that taking care of family members doesn't have to mean compromising my own health or giving into toxic relationships. There isn't a tidy, happy ending to my story where everything is forgiven and forgotten. Rather, it ends realistically, with relationships being reframed on better terms, professional assistance being sought, and boundaries being upheld. That's the best we can do at times, and that's acceptable. My last update will be this one. We are grateful to everyone who helped and counseled us along the way. I was able to strike a balance between self-preservation and compassion because of your ideas.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My wife poisoned my family against me and took my daughter away, but years later, the truth finally came out. This is a story I never imagined I'd tell publicly, but after all that has happened, I need to get it off my chest. The previous several weeks have been nothing short of a roller coaster. Maybe someone out there can help me figure out if I'm really the terrible guy in all of this. I, 48 million, have experienced a tornado of emotions and experiences over the last decade, and it has all come to a climax in unexpected ways. It all began many years ago, when I married Laura, the mother of my daughter Emily. Laura and I were high school sweethearts, and at first, our bond appeared impenetrable. We were young, full of dreams, and eager to face the world together. But life has a way of tearing apart even the strongest relationships, and it wasn't long before the flaws in our relationship began to appear. Laura came from a wealthy family, accustomed to a life of luxury, whilst I grew up in a more modest home. Despite our disagreements, I loved her profoundly and did my best to provide for her in the way she was accustomed to. But no matter how hard I tried, it wasn't enough. The stress of attempting to meet Laura's expectations weighed heavily on me, and our marriage began to falter. Our relationship deteriorated, and we argued more frequently. I observed Laura appeared detached, as if her mind was elsewhere. I attempted to reach out to figure out what was wrong, but she continually dismissed me, stating that everything was okay. Only later, during the divorce proceedings, did I uncover the tragic reality. Laura had been unfaithful to me several times during our marriage. The revelation struck me like a ton of bricks. All those evenings I worked late to support our family, all the sacrifices I made to keep our marriage afloat, and she had been betraying me the entire time. Despite the grief and betrayal, my first priority was Emily, our daughter. She was just 11 years old at the time, and I wanted to do everything I could to be there for her. But that hope was dashed during the divorce settlement. Laura was determined to portray me as the villain in our story. She accused me of being emotionally distant and inattentive, and even hinted at possible abuse, all of which were false. But Laura was convincing, and she was able to turn my entire family against me, including my parents and siblings. They all believed her narrative and assumed that I had done something dreadful to push her to adultery. It seemed like I was stranded on an island, with no one willing to listen to me. The courtroom battle was ugly, and despite my best efforts, the judge sided with Laura. She was given full custody of Emily, while I was granted limited visitation rights. Laura destroyed even those few opportunities to visit my baby. She frequently forgot about scheduled visits, claiming Emily was unwell or had other commitments. I would volunteer to drive Emily to school or assist her with assignments, but Laura refused to let me play any significant role in her life. My family, who had always been close to Emily, supported Laura and helped her keep my daughter away from me. They were determined to remove me from Emily's life, and I was powerless to stop them. The years that followed were among the most agonizing of my life. It began subtly at first. Emily would be hesitant to visit me, preferring to stay with her mother. Even though it stung, I attempted to understand. After all, children frequently prefer one parent over the other, correct? However, it soon became evident that something more sinister was at work. Emily would come to our appointments with a laundry list of complaints, things I allegedly did or said that depicted me as the evil guy. I was perplexed since none of it was accurate. When I tried to talk to Laura about it, she dismissed my concerns or twisted the conversation to make it appear as if I was crazy or exaggerating. I tried for years to establish a relationship with Emily, but it got increasingly impossible. Phone calls remained unanswered, letters were returned unopened, and my attempts to visit her were met with animosity from Laura and my family. They all seemed intent on erasing me from Emily's life. The worst thing happened when Emily was around 13. She said bluntly that she didn't want to see me anymore. She spoke it with coldness, as if I meant nothing to her. I was devastated. I knew Laura had been telling Emily lies, but I didn't have the heart to drag her through a messy court battle. After all, she wanted to stay with her mother, and separating her from her mother would only exacerbate the situation. I didn't want to be the source of further trouble in her life, so I reluctantly decided to pull back. It was one of the most difficult decisions I'd ever made. I hoped that one day she'd grasp the truth and return to me, but that didn't happen for a long time. Years later, I gradually but steadily moved past that horrific moment in my life. I met Megan, and there was an instant connection between us. Because of my previous experiences, we took our time getting to know each other before getting married. Megan had 2 children of her own, so the majority of my time was spent with them, and we established a life together. While I adored my new family, there was always a part of me that wondered about Emily. How was she doing? What had she become? I contacted Laura several times over the years to inquire about Emily, but she never replied. I tried to convince myself that Emily was better off without me, but I couldn't get rid of the sense that I had abandoned her. Then, unexpectedly, Emily contacted me. She was 20 years old now, and her message was brief and straightforward. She wanted to meet and chat. She stated she needed to know more about our family, including why I wasn't there for her. My heart skipped a beat as I read her message. The prospect of seeing her after all this time made me nervous, but I was not going to pass up the opportunity to see my kid. I was scared but excited. Perhaps this was the moment I had been waiting for all these years. We planned to meet in a quiet cafe. I was nervous as I waited for her to arrive. When she eventually walked in, I barely recognized her. She had matured into a beautiful young woman, but the wrath and sadness in her eyes were undeniable. She had clearly been carrying a lot of anguish for quite some time. We sat across from each other, and the tension was evident. Emily didn't spend time getting to the subject. She needed answers. Answers I knew would be difficult to hear. I took a big breath and started telling her the truth. I did not hold back. I told her everything. How her mother and family had deliberately poisoned her against me, how they had twisted every scenario to make me look terrible, and how I had worked so hard to be a part of her life despite everything. I told her about Laura's infidelity and the lies she told during the divorce. I spent the next 3 hours laying out the facts of what had happened. I had brought up previous court records, text messages, and emails that corroborated my story. I wanted Emily to know that I understood what she had been taught about me over the years, and that I wasn't the monster she had been led to believe. Emily sat startled as I explained what had transpired. She grew up believing that I was the one who had abandoned her, that I didn't care enough to be a part of her life. She found it overwhelming to learn the truth. I could see she was absorbing everything, so I didn't press her to react. I knew that was a lot for her to take in. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. She questioned me why I never fought back, why I didn't do more to stay in her life. That question crushed me. I had to explain that I did not want to place her in the center of a court dispute and that I believed standing back was the best way to protect her. I wanted her to have a good upbringing, even if it meant she despised me for a while. But the truth was that I regretted not battling harder. I regretted allowing Laura and her family to control the story. Emily appeared to be gaining a better understanding of what had happened. She was outraged, partly at me, but largely at her mother. She couldn't believe Laura had gone to such efforts to make herself look like the better parent. Emily realized she had to take action. She stated that she wanted to confront her mother and lay everything out for everyone. I was astonished, but also proud of her for advocating for herself. Emily wasn't the young kid I knew a decade ago. She was a strong lady capable of self-defense. At the same time, I was concerned about the impact this would have on her. I breathed a sigh of relief when she said she wasn't sure how to go with our connection because she'd grown accustomed to having an absent father, but she'd love to meet and talk more. Laura bombarded me with angry phone calls and text messages 2 days later. Emily apparently challenged her with the information I shared. Laura was outraged, accusing me of turning Emily against her and ruining their friendship. I didn't expect Emily's next action. She called me yesterday to say she's going to take Laura to court for parental alienation. She intends to sue for the emotional harm caused by years of lies and manipulation. Laura still calls me constantly now. She is between demanding that I talk Emily out of the lawsuit and threatening. My family is also getting in touch, suddenly wanting to straighten things out and reconnect. I'm at a loss. One could say that Emily's at last knowing the truth relieves some guilt. Conversely, I never meant for things to get this far. Along with Emily, I also have Megan and her children to look for at this point in my life. I'm not sure whether I could manage the same mental strain once more. While Laura and my family should pay for their acts, I don't want to bring further suffering or trouble. I have been essentially torn. Emily deserves praise for searching the truth and for trying to speak out against the mistreatment she has suffered. But I also worry for her. The legal system is harsh, particularly in cases involving families, and I wanted her to suffer less than she already had. From a distance, I attempted to assist her so she could make her own decisions and let her know I was always available for her should she need me. The emotional strain Laura and my family are causing is not even something I can articulate. All of this makes me wonder if, despite this complex scenario, I did the right thing by telling my daughter the truth about her mother and our past. Your advice and views would be much valued. Update 1. Hey everyone, things have turned bad, which was rather natural. Any confrontation with Laura would not be simple since she shows no respect for anyone around her. I only knew that would also include our daughter. Emily came to our house after her argument with her mother. Her eyes were red from crying. She unleashed this time without restraint. She laid everything out, every agonizing aspect of her life for the past 8 years. Laura might have gained custody, but it was abundantly evident that she had no concept what it meant to be a mother, let alone look after a child. Emily related how Laura wasn't even home half of the time. She would be away, occasionally for days on end, leaving Emily to care for herself. Laura was intoxicated and erratic half of the time, when she was home. Emily talked of evenings when Laura would come home in a fury, throwing things, screaming, and occasionally even blaming Emily for her own mistakes and discontent. As she related these events, the loneliness, the anxiety she must have experienced, my heart broke. Still to come though, was the worst. Emily related to us two occurrences that still tormented her. She was 13 years old at first. Laura had departed without food or money, alone for the weekend. Emily burned her hand quite severely while trying to prepare something for herself. She was in great agony, but when she tried phoning Laura, she did not answer. Just a child, Emily had to go to the closest hospital with her hand covered in a towel. Alone, terrified, in pain, she waited hours in the ER before a nurse at last spotted her and attended to her. Emily showed me the scar on her palm, a continual reminder of her mother's negligence. Still worse was the second episode. Laura had been on a drinking frenzy for weeks. She was 15. Emily made every effort to avoid her mother, until one evening Laura became aggressive. In a flash of wrath, she flung a glass at Emily that broke against her leg severely. Emily was in shock and bleeding. Instead of tending to her, Laura yelled at her to tidy the mess. Terrified, Emily covered her leg in an old shirt and headed once more toward the hospital. She wound up needing sutures there. I had a range of emotions as Emily related these tales: sorrow for all the suffering Emily had gone through, and fury at Laura for sending our daughter through this dream. It was not something I had felt in years. She was young and not deserving of any of this. She did not deserve to be left terrified, injured and alone. The one person meant to be defending her ought not to treat her like a burden. This was unmistakable physical and psychological assault. It seemed ironic that Laura's daily routines included the very things she had accused me of dragging Emily away from. Laura should have simply let me look after Emily to prevent all of this. Emily may have had a normal, contented life if she hadn't been so enthralled with her own selfishness and spite. The entire evening Megan and I listened to Emily. We checked to see she felt at ease and understood she was safe now. Megan specifically consoled Emily by holding her hand and telling her none of this was her fault. Having someone console Emily, tell her she was loved and that she mattered, seemed so important to her. Then Emily apologized to me in a moment that was both sad and contradictory. She had nothing to repent of, hence she didn't need to? But she did. She admitted she pushed me away, she was sorry for believing all the lies her mother had taught her, and she should have seen the reality sooner. Her voice faltered as she informed me she had missed me so much over these years and had frequently wondered what life would have been like if she had lived with me instead. I told her how much I had missed her too, how I had never stopped thinking about her, how I had never stopped loving her, and that she did not need to apologize for anything as Laura's games merely served as a victim's stage. That was a mixed feeling. Hearing her apologies hurt, but it also meant that we were at last re-establishing our relationship following all these years apart. I also came to see that I was done running from family strife and playing it safe. Though it meant facing legal conflict with my ex-wife, my daughter's well-being was at risk and I was determined to receive the apology and reparations she deserved. After a restless night of consoling and chatting, Emily and I hatched a strategy early the next morning. We were going to face my family about everything. Every lie, every act of neglect, everything Emily had gone through. I was done with them acting as though they were the ideal family while Laura had helped Emily to ruin her early years. The medical records, text messages, and even some old Laura voicemails Emily had preserved provided the evidence we needed. It was time to tell them just exactly what their complicity had cost. It was time to reveal the truth. Emily seemed anxious, but I could also detect a resolution in her eyes not previously seen. I was going to be right there beside her. She was ready to meet them and defend herself. At last, we would be getting the justice we both deserved, and I knew that whatever happened would be shared by us. Whatever transpires, you folks will be the first to know. It means a lot to have you understand my circumstances and provide constructive remarks. This is absolutely not the end, hence I will come returning with updates. Update 2. Hi everybody, hope everyone is doing fantastic? Think back to the family confrontation Emily and I had scheduled. Well, it happened and it was most certainly memorable. I agreed to pay a surprise visit together with my daughter. I saw the amazement on their faces as soon as we entered the door. They seemed unable to really handle seeing us together, united after all these years. They had never imagined that the years of isolation, manipulation, and deceit could be quickly reversed. Here we were nevertheless, poised side by side ready to face them. The first shock passed swiftly, and they hurried to present their customary worried front. The first person to talk was my mother, whose voice was tinged with phony anxiety as she asked Emily whether I had offended her or harmed her. The implication stung, not because I cared what others thought of Laura, but rather because it demonstrated how firmly they had embraced her story. Though it was a horrible idea, one they appeared to hold without doubt was that I would hurt my own daughter. Perhaps because it would help them to defend their own behavior, they were fast to accept the worst of me. But Emily was no more the terrified, bewildered child Laura knew, and I was not Laura. Emily stepped forward before I could answer. Her voice was firm, full of a quiet strength that made me proud. She urged them to abandon the act, to stop acting as though they cared when throughout the years they had done nothing to support her. Her statements were neither wavering or hesitant. She called them out for their indifference, for standing by while Laura ignored and mistreated her, and for helping to bring about the ruin of her early years. I observed as my siblings and parents struggled to hide their uneasiness. Their looks changed from pretended concern to something more like irritation. They disliked being challenged, particularly not by Emily, who they still considered as a child, someone who ought to be appreciative of whatever sloppiness of attention they had given her. But Emily was no child anymore, and she showed no interest in their empty apologies or explanations. Some of you have inquired how Laura simply set my own family against me. Our relationship has always been complex, underlying animosity and years of unresolved problems entangling it. My siblings and I had never been close. There was always a sense of one-upmanship, of competitiveness, that corroded any possibility of a real bond. Rather than encouraging harmony, my parents had sided with whichever child would have the greatest benefit for them at the time. Laura came to them intending to divorce me, and they saw it as a chance to vent their residual animosity at me. They had not given Emily or me any thought about how it would affect us. Their interests were more in seeing me pushed down a peg than in clearing past records. Emily gave out everything that had happened. How Laura had deserted her, how she had experienced trauma and injuries while they turned a blind eye, and I could see the anxiety rising on their faces. Particularly not by someone they had undervalued for so long, they were not used to being questioned in this manner. It was not only the words that stung, it was Emily's holding of them responsible, refusing to let their typical platitudes absolve them. Of course, we withheld some of what we had. Showing all of our cards at once was not necessary. We had text messages, hospital records, and other data readily able to undermine their well-crafted story. For now, though, we kept most of it under wraps, simply showing enough to make it abundantly evident we were serious. This was a warning, a proclamation that we were done following their guidelines and that things were going to get far more serious, not only some emotional outburst. We fled the house not waiting for any reply. Nothing they could say would make any difference, nothing that would undo the years of suffering and neglect they had let to occur. Emily said one last farewell as we turned away. She advised them to forward it to Laura, therefore alerting her that we were arriving with a somewhat heavy case and she should be ready for it. Although the silence that followed us as we departed was oppressive, it was a silence loaded with unspoken words, the weight of what was to come. Emily and I had marked our line on the sand. There was no turning back. The family has always prospered on separation, on keeping us apart and at conflict with one another. But now, Emily and me standing together, they were the ones who would have to deal with the fallout. I want you to know that I am always reading over each and every comment. All of you have given me some of the best advice. Your help is quite valuable. Update 3. Hello, I want to thank everyone who has supported and advised me based on this narrative. Though I believe we are at last seeing a way forward, the previous few days have been some of the most difficult of my life. So strap up for a long one. I got in touch with one of our lawyers right away following the event at my family's house. Not just to me but also to Emily. I was not ready to let Laura get away with all she had done. Emily startled me nevertheless when I mentioned considering legal action. She wanted no more legalities moving ahead. Far from contrary, it was not that she lacked empathy or that she was forgiving her mother. Emily had different responsibilities now and had lately gone through a lot. She had great ideas for her future and her academic life was vibrant. She could not afford to pause to sue her mother and handle a court dispute. As her dad, I was really proud of her. She was still a brilliant, tenacious young woman with enormous professional possibilities ahead of her after all she had gone through. I did, however, also find myself torn. Part of me wanted Laura to suffer for her deeds, to pay for the suffering she had brought about. One thing I did wrong was ruin my life. Nevertheless, I found unforgivable damage done to Emily, that of robbing her of a normal, happy childhood. I did, however, honor Emily's desires. Unlike her mother's, her view counted here, and it was something I would constantly keep in mind while deciding what to do. Another thing occurred when we were negotiating all of this. 2 days later, Laura's neighbor walked up to our door bearing an envelope. The neighbor said Laura had asked her to bring the mail to us as she was temporarily leaving town. Though I had no idea what to expect, I accepted the envelope and thanked the neighbor. Within the envelope Laura had a note, long and full of apologies and explanations. It sought to defend her behavior. She talked about losing her job, how she grew quite alone when I left, and how events descended from there. She finally landed another job, but it paid little, and she descended into more misery. Drinking became her coping mechanism. She said she never intended to hurt Emily, that she was simply so lost and overwhelmed by her own suffering. Laura continued to go into great detail about more of her challenges, seeking to depict a lady driven to the brink by events beyond her reach. But reading made me focus only on how hollow everything sounded. Laura was obviously trying to justify her actions and project an impression of victimization from her own experiences. But no degree of difficulty could excuse her treatment of Emily. She begged us not to go to legal war at the end of the letter. As a show of kindness, she pledged to avoid Emily. She also offered to pay whatever we felt was appropriate as reparations for the damage she had done. Emily's eyes showed grief as soon as I turned over the letter to her. She had not sought this apology, and it most definitely was not the resolution she was due. What kind of mother leaves her child like this and subsequently believes that money could possibly offset all the years of suffering and neglect? For Emily, it was a terrible insight. I knew she needed time to get through it. Emily needed space, as she would reach out to Megan or me when she was ready. For Emily, someone she could confide in without judgment, my wife Megan had become fast a comfort. Soon Emily became like family to all of us, developing a close relationship with Megan's kids. Although I wanted to assist, I knew Emily would gain more from Megan's support and viewpoint to help her to organize everything. Eventually Emily came to me with her choice. She refused to go after a legal lawsuit. She wanted not to drag things out anymore or become mired in a nasty court struggle. Freed from the shadows of the past, she wanted to start anew and concentrate on her and her future. Emily was ready to go on, and I knew this was the right decision even if I wanted justice for her. She had lived under the weight of her mother's errors for sufficient time. She was ready to live her life on her terms. Emily's choice sent us into a fresh chapter. She began concentrating more on her academics, directing her efforts toward her objectives and dreams. As Megan negotiated this new stage of her life, Megan and I kept helping her in all possible respects, providing direction and encouragement. Regarding myself, this seems like a dream. Things cannot have concluded on a better note. I have 3 children and an incredible wife at my side. Though the trip had been protracted and agonizing, at last we had returned to one another. More than all, that was the real success in all of this. Once more, I appreciate all of your support. Though it's been an incredible journey, I believe we are at last headed toward recovery.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.